Let's get into this conversation now. Members of Parliament's ad hoc committee are expected to visit Kgoši Mampuru Prison this week to hear testimony from the controversial tenderpreneur Vusimuzi Cat Matlala, who is incarcerated on attempted murder charges. Now, the body is looking into allegations of infiltration in the criminal justice system, and that's where Matlala has been named as a member of the so-called Big Five cartel. Let's speak now to legal expert Ulrich Roux, who talks to us about what the committee could possibly hear from Mr. Matlala and how far can he go to reveal stuff without implicating himself. Ulrich, good to have you. As always, thank you for your time. Let's start with how much Mr. Matlala can reveal without implicating himself.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, so his testimony will be given under oath, which means that he declares that it is the truth that he's telling before the parliamentary ad hoc committee. There is, however, a rule against testifying in such a committee that he cannot be forced to give any evidence which self-incriminates him in having committed any crimes. That however, if he voluntarily gives evidence which ultimately does incriminate himself, then it's not the duty of the committee to stop him or the duty of anyone who sits on the committee to stop him. So, there's been some really explosive testimony both before the Madlanga Commission as well as the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, and one would have to wait and see how Cat Matlala responds to that. He's been implicated in severe corruption and untoward behavior. And one would have to wait and see until he testifies tomorrow to see if he is able to clear his name or whether through cross-examination by the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee he digs an even deeper hole for himself. It's interesting and it's not the norm that the committee is, of course, traveling from Cape Town to the Kgoši Mampuru Prison in Pretoria to conduct this hearing. Now, the reason for that is nothing more than it would have been a logistical nightmare to bring Mr. Matlala from Kgoši Mampuru Prison, incarcerate him in Pollsmoor Prison, and then having him testify before the committee in Parliament there. So the committee made a joint decision that they will be coming up to Pretoria, and the Kgoši Mampuru Prison has the facilities to accommodate them, and accordingly the committee will be proceeding from the prison when he testifies, which certainly is a first in my experience, and interesting that they deem Mr. Matlala's testimony so important that they are willing to all travel up to Pretoria in order for it to be conducted.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting sight to see, Ulrich. But let's come back to this, because some people will say Mr. Matlala already sits in prison and therefore in their minds he has nothing to lose. But let's not forget, he is still free of any convictions. And so he is not a convicted man yet. And so he probably will do his best to reveal as much as he can without implicating himself. I wonder how far that would go. But can he be viewed as someone with an axe to grind, so to speak, against those that he feels are sitting pretty outside?
Yes, I think we must not forget, as you correctly point out, that he's been refused bail, but he's not been convicted of anything as yet. So the old cliche rings true that he is innocent until proven guilty. So I think it would be a push to say that he has nothing to lose. He has everything to lose. Should he be convicted of the charges that he's currently faced with, then he will spend a minimum of 15 years in prison. But the state, of course, needs to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that has not taken place yet. I think it's going to be very interesting, because remember that his name has popped up on a number of occasions. The most notably so, the 360 million rand tender that was awarded to his company by the Minister of Police or the police ministry, and whether that was awarded lawfully and whether there was any corruption or fraud that took place in the awarding of that tender. Then he's also been implicated in the Tembisa scandal with billions of taxpayers' money being squandered there, and all the fraud and corruption that's come out of that, the awarding of that Tembisa tenders. So, he's also come out to say that he fears for his safety. And that's one of the reasons why he refused to testify, to travel to Cape Town as well, because he is fearful that he could possibly suffer harm to himself if he's let out of Kgoši Mampuru Prison. But at the end of the day, having taken all of that into account, I think we must remember what the purpose is of both the Matlala Commission as well as this Parliamentary Ad Hoc Commission. And it's a fact-finding commissions. They must hear testimony and they must listen to testimony, and evidence must be produced. And from that, the South African Police Services and the National Prosecuting Authority must use that evidence and that information to pursue and to prosecute people if there has been criminal wrongdoing. So I think in Cat Matlala's case, he would be careful to implicate people and to point fingers if he doesn't have the proof to substantiate that. And that's unfortunately, being quite prevalent in the Matlala Commission, especially, where people have just testified without corroborating their testimony with any evidence and factual evidence to prove that what they are saying is in fact the truth.
Yeah.
We saw Brown, sorry, I forget his name, Mr. Brown, who testified, and Brown Mokgotsi, who testified, and he was absolutely, ripped to pieces in cross-examination because, the allegations that he was making was just so far-fetched, and there was nothing to substantiate that, to indicate that it was indeed the truth. And I think that Cat Matlala would be very wary of that. And at the end of the day, if there is damning evidence against him, to such a degree that it's simply impossible to escape the allegations that have been leveled against him, then he would be well advised to tell the truth and to testify in a way which could be seen as mitigating circumstances at the end of the day. If a person is truthful, both before a commission like the Matlala Commission as well as a parliamentary ad hoc committee, that would serve in their best interest in the long run should a prosecution be pursued against them. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Mr. Matlala's strategy is going to be before the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee.
Those who are said to have had alleged dealings with him, starting with the police ministry that gave him that 350 million rand tender. The head of procurement was at the ad hoc committee just towards the end of the week we have just come from. And one of the admissions that he was forced to make there was that there was no value for money in this particular tender. So how he awarded or how he got awarded that tender, I'm thinking of people within that department. Should they be worried? I'm thinking about people whose palms he is alleged to have greased with money in order for certain things to happen. I'm thinking about those that had the gift of being given the luxury of sleeping in his apartment for 2 days. What was that in exchange for? How worried should people like those that I've counted above be that he reveals just enough for authorities to start sniffing around?
Well, I think that the most obvious answer to that question is that corruption is not a one-way street. There is always at least two parties who partake in the crime of corruption. So if that tender was awarded illegally and unlawfully, which certainly on the face of it seems as if it has been, then it's not only Cat Matlala who's going to be facing charges of corruption, it's also all of the individuals involved with the awarding of that tender to his company. It's almost scandalous if you read the facts about the awarding of that tender. Mr. Matlala has zero experience in medical services. Yet his company is awarded a 360 million rand tender to provide medical services to the police ministry and the entire police service. And I agree with the testimony that was led that there was zero value for money. Now, firstly, if the tender wasn't awarded properly and through the correct channels, and indeed there's evidence to show that people received undue benefit for awarding that tender, then it's, as I said, not only Mr. Matlala who's going to be facing charges, it's also the people in the administrative positions responsible for the awarding of that tender and responsible for not ensuring that the correct procedures were followed, who is also going to have to face the music. And on that note, I think that, society is tired of just listening and seeing these committees. One looks at the Zondo Commission and all of the testimony that was led there, billions of rands of taxpayers' money being spent in conducting that commission, and yet there has not been one successful prosecution by the NPA based on evidence led at the Zondo Commission. And I think society is tired of seeing the squandering of taxpayers' money into these commissions. And if that is one goal of the Madlanga Commission, coupled by the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, it would be to ensure that if criminality is exposed during this commission and by the Ad Hoc Committee, then the police and the National Prosecuting Authority do whatever they must in order to ensure that these people are properly investigated, that they are charged, and that proper prosecutions see the light of day in our criminal courts, so that the Madlanga Commission is not also seen at the end of the day as a complete waste of time and waste of taxpayers' money when there is indeed evidence being led which implicates people in serious wrongdoing. And I think that, based on Cat Matlala's testimony before the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, it would be interesting to see what next steps are going to be taken after the conclusion of these sittings, because certainly, in my view, there are a lot of people who need to answer some very tough questions and have certainly implicated themselves or have been implicated in serious criminal acts, and one would like to see the South African Police Services and the NPA take the next steps to ensure that these people are prosecuted.
Ulrich Roux, thank you very much for your time and helping us understand what could be at stake here.